What is going on, Stack in the Box? My name is Mike Luciano, your fearless leader, for yet another NFL week recap. We are on to week 7. And as always, week 7 brings some upsets. In fact, an inordinate amount of upsets. I can't even wait to see how many survivor pools have just been completely trashed as a result of this week's festivities. So before we get into that, just to get the housekeeping out of the way, you can find Stack in the Box on all the major platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever it may be that you get your podcasts. We're on all those sites. Make sure you also subscribe on YouTube. We just passed the 9,000 subscriber mark, which we are extremely grateful for. So thank you so much for supporting our multitude of shows that way. So let's just get right into it. And as always, there's one big lesson that you want to take away from the week. So often it ends up coming from the Sunday night football game. This time, the Philadelphia Eagles, after licking their wounds from Zach Wilson, of all people, darting them up and beating them in one of the biggest upsets of the year, they got the Miami Dolphins and the mega Death Star laser show offense that comes with Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill. And they beat them pretty resoundingly with a throwback game plan of, we're going to throw our biggest guys at you and we're going to run it right at you. We'll see if you can stop it. And they couldn't. Now, I could focus on the Eagles angle of things because there are some different storylines going on with the Eagles that deserve greater coverage. Jalen Hurts throwing more interceptions, the improved defense, which now gets Kevin Byard from the Tennessee Titans, which I think will be a huge acquisition for them. But the biggest story, I think, is Miami. And this is a Miami team that I've had a weird relationship with this Miami team because I went from, I don't believe in them at all because of Tua. I have my doubts about Tua. Then, are they maybe the best team in the AFC? And then now we're back down again. Now, they'll still be good. Then they had a ton of obstacles in their way. They lose most of their offensive line. They lose Jalen Waddle, which is probably the best number 2 receiver in the league right now. I don't care who you are, lose a player of Jalen Waddle's caliber. Hard to really overcome that. I don't care if you're Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa, or Zach Wilson, whoever you are. That's a tough loss. But it illuminated something for me about these Dolphins. And I don't like using terms like soft or a Southern Miami team in a cold weather city, because they're not that. That's not fair. But I think this team has some ceilings, and maybe the offense is kind of beaten up on some cream puffs a little bit. Now, they're still fine, but if you look at who they've beaten, the 5 wins this year that the Miami Dolphins have had, they have not beaten a ton of good teams. Their 5 wins have come against the Panthers, who are the Wins Panthers, the Broncos, the Giants, the Patriots, and the Chargers. If the season ended today, those 5 teams would have the 1st, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 9th picks in the draft. And even the Chargers, who are a mess right now, even with Justin Herbert as good as he is, he's not playing his best right now. The Chargers barely lost. They lost by 2 points? They hung with them, and then they beat up on a Denver defense that's complete trash right now, on a horrible Giants offensive line, a winless Carolina team. It's easy to just have Tyreek Hill run all over the place and go uncovered 70 yards down the field. With all that dysfunction, it's quite easy. Then you get to the 2 playoff teams that they have played, Buffalo and Miami. And Tua Tagovailoa, who has a passer rating of 118 in the 5 wins, his passer rating is barely above 90 in the 2 losses to Buffalo and Philadelphia, both of which are on the road. So what does that say? Well, it says a couple things. Number one, that while this offense is good, I don't think they're going to score 35 points every game because so much of it is misdirection and sleight of hand. Very David Copperfield. Look over here. Stuff's actually in this hand. That seems like a lot of how Mike McDaniel does. And when you first get hit with it, it reminded me almost of Lamar Jackson in his first year with the Ravens and how the year after that he kind of wasn't Lamar Jackson. We'll have more about how great he is a little bit later in the show. But the first year he came into the NFL, it was like an alien meteor crashed and nobody knew how to defend it, and he just ran wild, and the league almost needed a year to kind of figure out what the hell to even do about this thing. And then later teams got some principles in and at least found a game plan that can slow him down a little bit. Tua's been hurt the last couple of years. Now he's starting to finally get into a rhythm with Hill and Waddle and McDaniel and Devon Achane when he's healthy, and Raheem Mostert who's having a career year. That's all there, but I think maybe the league is kind of figuring out what to do with this Dolphins offense. It could still be effective, but my two concerns are number one, that they are becoming a little, not soft, that's the wrong word, but you know what, let's use it for the sake of finding a better word, a little soft up front. And the Eagles, with a tremendous front four, just beat up on them pretty regularly in that game. I mean, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, both of them got home, which they should have done against a Miami team that did not have a particularly good offensive line. That's what they should do. The other concern that I have with this Miami offense is it seems like every time the Tua gets into trouble, it's just F it, Tyreek Hill's down there somewhere. I believe at one point in the game, he had 17 completions and Tyreek Hill had 10 of them, which, again, that's a good strategy for most of the time because Tyreek's such a unique athlete who's so fast. But it can't be a winning formula that far down in the season, in December and January. The Bills have tried that a couple of years in a row with Stephon Diggs, where Josh Allen said, all right, nothing's open. I'm either going to run it through Stephon Diggs. Didn't really work. Cincinnati figured it out. Kansas City figured it out. So Miami, I'd like to see if they can just beat one team that I think is going to play really deep in the postseason. All I need to see is one win, and then I'll at least be back on top, because right now we are almost halfway through the year and the Dolphins have not beaten a good team. And that leaves a lot of uncertainty right now in an AFC that, as we're going to get into, is very much up for grabs and has kind of a hierarchy that's starting to separate at the top. Couple more big losses like this, and there's some real criticism you got to ask of Mike McDaniel, who I love as a coach. You got to at least say, all right, Mike, all right, Tua, are you just beating up on little sisters of the poor here? Are you a college team who plays an FCS team and you win 63-0, and then you go in conference and you get smacked? Is that what you are? Prove me wrong. I think you can. You got the talent to. Prove me wrong. So we're going to move into our stock report, which is our recurring weekly segment, and we're going to look at the players who are thriving and feeling good and have some mojo, and then the guys who kind of wish week 7 went a lot better for them. And I'll start with a guy that I wouldn't thought I'd be talking about in an NFL context right now, a former Division II quarterback from Shepherd, go Rams, who's the son of a professional arm wrestler, and that's my guy Tyson Bagent, who I'm going to say coming out in the draft, you can go look, check this out. I had a 6th-round grade on Tyson Bagent, and I was extremely surprised he did not get drafted. Because I remember watching his film at D2 Shepherd. I almost couldn't evaluate it. It was like Zapruder film. They had one game where they didn't even have an overhead angle. It was almost like a guy on the first down chain marker from the sideline. I'm like, I can't evaluate this. Then I see he's at the Senior Bowl. I'm like, all right, this is like the one shot me and so many teams are going to really get at this guy in a competitive setting. And he played extremely well, practiced extremely well. Goes to the Bears, beats out. I know Nathan Peterman's not good, but he's an undrafted D2 rookie, and he beat out a veteran for the QB2 job. That deserves some praise. And yeah, he didn't light it up against the Raiders. He had, I believe, a 2.1 average depth of target. It was check downs and get the ball out quick. But you know what? It worked. 30 points. He completes 70% of his passes for a rookie in his first start. I don't care who it's against. That's very impressive. I don't think the arm is amazing, but I don't think it's a pop gun like everybody's making it seem. And I think Bagent, I don't think he's ever going to be a starter. The talk of him coming in for Justin Fields is kind of lunacy. Like, Fields is obviously the better player. He's the better athlete, and he's the guy the Bears are going to roll with if he's healthy for at least the rest of the season. We'll see what happens if they're in the Caleb Williams or Drake May sweepstakes. But Tyson Bagent just secured 6 to 7 years of salary and income with that game, I think, because he at least showed, you know what? I'm a capable backup. You need a guy for a game or two, I can be that guy. And I'm happy for that. And I'm happy for the message it sends, too, for guys who are in D2 and the lower ranks of football. It's like, man, if you can ball, league will find you. League's got eyes everywhere. They found this guy in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia. And now here he is playing for the Chicago Bears and beating the Las Vegas Raiders, which, as we'll get into with Josh McDaniels, not really too much of an achievement on the grand scale of things if you compare it in the NFL. But you know what? Praise to Tyson Bagent. Tough situation. Comes out smelling like a rose. I'm really happy for the kid. I really am. And poor Josh McDaniels. This guy just reeks. as a head coach. I'm sorry. I can't remember a guy being more pre-fired before he actually gets fired in years. Like Mike Mularkey, I remember in Jacksonville in Tennessee, I remember was that bad. Even like Ron Rivera near the end in Carolina, that was up there. This guy starts Brian Hoyer, who's now lost his last 13 starts. Defense looks lifeless. Devontae Adams is pissed. Hunter Renfrow can't play. These are the freaking Raiders. If nothing else, they were one of the most fun, exciting teams for decades under Al Davis. This is the least fun team in the league. McDaniels is just such a wet blanket for everything. It drives me crazy. Hopefully, losing to Tyson Bagent and Baker Mayfield after he only had 3 days with the Rams, and Jeff Saturday after he was coaching high school ball. Hopefully that's enough to finally break the camel's back. Maybe that's the final straw. And then Tyson Bagent precipitates the end of Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas. Our first stock down is another quarterback, and he didn't even play, and his stock went down, and that's Daniel Jones. Because the pessimists and the Daniel Jones supporters will say, well, Tyrod Taylor, or Tyrod Taylor, I believe it's actually supposed to be Tyrod. And it didn't correct it for a long time, but Tyrod. Tyrod Taylor didn't play amazing in the last couple games, and you're right, he didn't. The Giants have scored 23 points in the last 2 games. That's below average. Very much so. Even with that, the fact they were 1 yard away from beating the Bills, and they did beat the Commanders, division rival, hated rival, comparable 1-53 roster. The fact he beat them, got to take your cap off to Tyrod Taylor. You know how I know Tyrod Taylor is superior to Daniel Jones? Because even though his offensive line stinks. It stinks out loud. I'm not even going to try and act like it's anything except a terrible offensive line. One of the worst in the league. When Daniel Jones was playing, you were hearing, this line is so historically bad, no one can do anything. And then Tyrod Taylor comes in last 2 weeks. You heard anything about the offensive line? I haven't. Now, he's getting pressured and sacked, but he just has this savvy and this quick processing. He gets the ball out quick. He's using Darren Waller more than Daniel Jones ever did. Saquon Barkley had a nice reception that he took for a long touchdown against Washington. Throws 2 touchdowns in that game, does Tyrod Taylor. A lot of people, I saw the sentiment on Twitter, I think it might have been Ben Solak. I'm ready to start the bad faith Tyrod Taylor over Daniel Jones discussion. Hell, I'm ready to start the good faith one. I think he's just straight up better. I did not like that contract from the second Daniel Jones signed it. Immediately, I said this is a calamitous mistake. I'm not saying they should have given Tyrod Taylor a big contract, but the fact they committed to Jones, who had showed that little, was frightening to me. And now he's regressed this year. And Tyrod Taylor, capable backup, veteran guy, been on a million teams. This is, I think, his 11th year in the league. He showed that, you know what, even with just baseline competency and baseline processing ability, I can get the ball out quick and win a game. Now, we'll see if this can continue against the Jets, and I believe they play Josh McDaniels and the Raiders soon, but I feel like if Tyrod's in, the Giants season may be on life support, but maybe there's a chance they get out of hospice if they keep Tyrod in. With Daniel Jones, I think it might just be, honestly, punting time. That sounds weird to say about a quarterback they paid $40 million, but performance-wise, I mean, we got to be honest about how Daniel Jones has played the first few games of the year. The biggest blowout this week had to be Baltimore-Detroit, which just shocked me to no end. I mean, Detroit wasn't even in the game. I mean, the Ravens had 3 touchdowns before the Lions even had a first down. And this is a 5-1 Lions team who beat the Chiefs. This is a no-joke team. People want to rip the Lions. Lions are fraudulent. So, as I've said before, mostly referring this year to that whole Dallas-San Francisco game, no matter how good you are, like Mahomes and the Colts last year, one game, everything messes up. It's just a complete calamity. Everybody gets a mulligan. Everybody gets one. Detroit, I think this is their one. Because, I mean, they couldn't execute a game plan. They were in the hole so quickly. So let's talk about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense. And I put Baltimore offense as the stock up as a whole because we've seen Lamar Jackson play this well this year under Todd Monken. The 0 touchdown, 1 pick game against the Steelers, laugh all you want. That was one of the best games of the year by any quarterback. Dropping dimes everywhere. He just had his receivers make 8 drops. This is what happens when the guys around him finally start playing like real NFL players. He's had good running games before, but Mark Andrews was making plays. Zay Flowers had one of the best games of his career. Odell looked serviceable and not like washed Odell. Todd Monken was really creative. There's really no ceiling to how good this Baltimore team can be. If Jackson's cooking like this and the guys around him aren't dropping all these passes, because I think the defense proved it's for real, because the defense, like Miami, was beating up on a bunch of also-ran quarterbacks. I'm thinking, all right, now Jared Goff, Ben Johnson, who's everybody's new favorite head coaching candidate. He's probably going to be a head coach next year. Let's see what you got, Mike McDonald. And boy, oh boy, did he dominate. 6 points. And those points came really late in the game. So the Ravens may not have as good a record right now as Kansas City. Kansas City's the only one-loss team in the AFC. But after a game like that, if you were to say Baltimore is the best team in the AFC, I would not argue with you. I don't know if I'm there yet just because of the looming specter of Mahomes, but Baltimore, man, absolutely was just a meat grinder this week. Very impressive stuff. Very impressive stuff in the wrong fashion for Sean McDermott and his Buffalo Bills, who mustered 3 points against the Patriots in the first half, had to do a crazy, zany comeback to get the lead, and then let Mac Jones march down the field and basically play perfect football for the last fourth quarter. And this was Mac Jones, who's barely holding on to his job. He's been taken out of games the last 2 weeks. Bailey Zappi. They had to put Malik Cunningham in. They're like, all right, is this kind of the end of Mac Jones? Mac Jones saved his job. And I put the blame for that mostly on Sean McDermott, because although Allen was bad in the first half, second half he was pretty good. But I think that's emblematic of these McDermott-coached Buffalo teams. It doesn't matter who they're playing. They could be playing Kansas City, who they've beaten in the regular season. They can play a team like Baltimore, a team like Jacksonville, or even the Patriots. The Jets, it doesn't matter. You never know game to game what you're going to get. I remember I used to cover soccer when I was in college, NYCFC, shout out. And Patrick Vieira, the great player, was their manager at the time. And they had a very similar reputation, being inconsistent. Beat a team 3-0, lose 3-1. Even though they played a very possession-heavy, don't give up a ton of goals style. And I'm like, man, what is this? Vieira was one of those coaches, and the NFL's got a ton of these guys. If he figured you out pregame, if he cracked the code, get ready. It's an avalanche, like Buffalo did against Washington. They cracked the code, and they won like 37-3 or whatever it was, and Sam Howell threw 4 picks and got sacked 9,000 times. That's what happens when the Bills figure it out. When they don't, and they got to fly by the seat of their pants and make decisions and get off to a slow start, New England, the Jets game earlier this year, even the Jets game against Zach Wilson last year, they struggle in situations like that. The playoff game against Cincinnati, when they don't have you figured early on and they can't just bury you in a big avalanche, a big landslide where they blow you out, these are the kind of things that happen. You lose to a New England. You lose to a Zach Wilson. They can beat anybody. Anybody can beat them. They're 4-3. They play Tampa on Thursday Night Football this week. I am by no means chalking that up as a victory, because game to game, I don't know what this Bills team is. One day they look like the 85 Bears. Then they look like the 2008 Lions on defense. Allen will be great for a half, terrible for a half. Diggs will have 100 yards and a half, then he'll have 6 yards and a half. I truly don't know what to make of Buffalo. So because of that, until further notice, until they prove me wrong, there's a very finite number of Super Bowl contenders. Buffalo's on the outside of that right now. At their best, they can absolutely win the Super Bowl. That's how good Josh Allen is. He's just not consistent game to game, and it's killing him. It's absolutely killing him against Mac Jones, for crying out loud. Now, far be it from me to put a guy in stock up after his team gave up 38 points to Gardner Minshew, but I'm putting Myles Garrett in here, who has played a big part in the reason the Browns, with P.J. Walker and his 5 touchdowns, 14 interception career, are now 2-0 with Walker playing the majority of the game. Myles Garrett played a big part in that because, in my opinion, he is the defensive player of the year front runner, and he's putting a lot of distance in between number 2 and number 3. There have been better individual games statistically, Derek Thomas getting 7 sacks and all that, but with 2 sacks, multiple forced fumbles, and a blocked field goal, that's about as good of an impactful of a game as a defensive lineman like Myles Garrett can have. He also set the record for most sacks before his 28th birthday in NFL history, breaking Reggie White's record. Anytime you're a defensive lineman and your name is mentioned anywhere near a record that was held or is held, either one, by Reggie White, you're doing something right. Garrett, I know, didn't play like an all-pro immediately out of the gate, but over the last 4 years, he's basically averaging a sack a game. And he does it while stuffing the run. He does it while getting double teamed as much as anybody in the league. He does it with offenses that often don't let him really pin his ears back and just go crazy after the quarterback. They're not always playing with leads all the time. Myles Garrett is the main reason that Jim Schwartz defense is playing the way it is. And I felt bad for Gardner Minshew and the Colts in this game. I really did. Because Minshew, I thought, had a very, very, very good game. I think the offense looked good. I liked all the big plays. And they got hosed. Absolutely hosed by the officials at the end of that game. Unacceptable. Borderline, like, would revoke your ability to be an official in this league. And in my NFL, Commissioner Mike Luciano's NFL. But my goodness, Myles Garrett, with everything he did to take a field goal away, to stall drives, to pressure Gardner Minshew, nothing but respect for Myles Garrett, the Defensive Player of the Year frontrunner so far. In terms of stock down, I'm looking at a very suspect quarterback that I thought would get another year as a starter. I'm not so sure now. You can look at the numbers, and it says Jordan Love threw 2 touchdowns. Those were 2 rinky-dink touchdowns. One of them was tipped, and it fell miraculously into the hands of Jaden Reed on the goal line. Jordan Love got shut out in the first half against a team that not even a month ago gave up 70 points in a game. He got shut out. Dontavian Wicks, a receiver, threw a 14-yard trick play completion in the third quarter, and at the time, that was the longest pass play of the day for the Packers. Jordan Love is one of the most frustrating evaluations I've ever seen. Because in college, the one good year he had at Utah State, because again, we're basing all his future success off 2018 Utah State film, because 2019 he was not good. Jordan Love was phenomenal throwing the ball downfield. Now he's completed 6 passes throwing the ball downfield out of 27, which is horrible accuracy. So what the Packers are doing, in a sign that I think tells you they don't trust Jordan Love, is they're being ultra painfully conservative with some of these play calls. I mean, there was a point in the game he had probably 14 attempts for like 50 yards. It is dink and dunk and screen and drag and curl and screen again and drag again. It is mind-numbing to watch. And obviously there's going to be a downgrade from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, both in terms of the production and what you can expect out of a quarterback. But I mean, if this is what you're operating like, I mean, Tyson Bagent had a more open playbook than Jordan Love for large portions of the game against a terrible Broncos defense. An awful Broncos defense that Zach Wilson beat and that Tua Tagovailoa put up 70 points against. And Sam Howell put up 35 points against. Only mustered 7 against the Giants. That's the team he's playing against. He couldn't do nary a positive thing in that first half. Green Bay, I know they're a patient team. I know they're big on letting their quarterback sit and develop. That's what happened with Favre. That's what happened with Rodgers. But the fact that he has played, now this is his 4th year in the league. 4th year. You can't treat him like a rookie. 4 years, all in the same system, 3 years learning under Aaron Rodgers. That's not a rookie. That's almost a veteran in the NFL. If they keep trotting him out there like this and they just blindly commit to Jordan Love, in a division where Detroit is, I think, going to stay really good, and I think teams like Chicago and Minnesota, even though they're not good right now, have the capacity to improve very quickly, man, the Packers could be in for some real rough sledding. It might end up like the 80s. You might get more Lynn Dickeys and Don Majkowskis just holding the place until they get their next Favre. That's what they risk if Jordan Love doesn't get any better. So we're going to do some rapid-fire takes right now, and then we got about 4 games left, and then we'll preview the big 49ers-Vikings game on Monday Night Football, starting with Kansas City and the Chargers. And Kansas City, my goodness, Patrick Mahomes, take a bow. What a first half. That's as good of a first-half quarterback as you're going to see in this league. I mean, he had 3 incompletions. I believe one was an interception on 3rd down that was basically an arm punt. whatever at this point. It was they would have punted on the next play anyway if the guy dropped it and probably ended up there. And the other two were drops. Just phenomenal. Slicing up Brandon Staley's defense. They could no answer for him. You weren't beating Mahomes that day. I've noticed this sentiment on Twitter a lot about how now everybody's starting to kill Justin Herbert. Can we get a break with it? Number one, he's playing hurt. He's got a bum finger. I know not in his throwing hand, but if you're a quarterback and you got a hand injury, that'll mess you up a little bit. And this is now his second head coach. He's probably going to have a third head coach after this year because Brandon Staley is probably going to get fired. Third coordinator in 4 years. No Mike Williams, so there's no vertical threat. It's just Keenan Allen and then Josh Palmer, who's the most average player in the league, and Quentin Johnston, the first-round pick, who hasn't developed like they thought he would. Austin Eckler's a good running back, but the running game is 17th. Offensive line's it's okay, but when they play a superior opponent like a Kansas City, like a Dallas, they can get really overwhelmed and just compound on one another. The defense is a bottom-of-the-league defense with a defensive head coach. I'm going to defend Herbert in the same way I defended Phillip Rivers, where it felt like for years Phillip Rivers was doing everything he could to even get the Chargers to 8-9 wins. That's what I feel like Herbert's doing. And it's sad for Charger fans that they basically lose Phillip Rivers, 15 years of great production, no postseason success, oftentimes because of circumstances not in his control. And now you got to go to Justin Herbert, who's doing the exact same thing. It's tough. I know Herbert, you want to see him win some more games, but this Chargers team, if they didn't have Herbert right now and they had a league average quarterback in there, this is probably a winless team in the Caleb Williams and Drake May sweepstakes. That is how much Herbert is single-handedly elevating them. Falcons Bucks. I was going to make this an anti-Arthur Smith parade because of what they were doing with Bijan Robinson before it came out now that he just wasn't feeling good. I don't know if he had food poisoning or what, if it was a muscle thing or what. Now, there's obviously going to be some controversy about why the hell was he even active if he was hurt and he wasn't feeling well. We'll put that to the side for a little bit. We'll also put Baker Mayfield to the side for a little bit, who I feel like the steam's starting to run out. I mean, he's been okay. He's been very good this year. I think a lot better than we all thought he would be, but that's now 19 points in the last 2 games, 2 straight losses, and Buffalo on deck. Tampa Bay will be okay. Baker Mayfield will be okay, but I feel like I just see a lot of the energy getting sucked out of that team right now. With Atlanta, I said that Jordan Love was the most frustrating evaluation. Number 2 is clearly Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder's highs, which are often not in the red zone, are extremely high. Top half quarterback in the league high. I like his poise. I like his ability to make plays out of structure. And when they let him throw downfield, I feel like he's had pretty good downfield accuracy, like deep down the field, even though he doesn't have necessarily all the receivers to take advantage of it. A lot to like about Desmond Ridder. Then he gets in the red zone, and he makes some plays that are so baffling and in their stupidity that you're saying, how is this guy not in the XFL or the USFL? The highs and the lows are stunning. And then, as always seems to be with the Falcons, they're always in these close games late. He gets the ball late and he makes some plays. Do you know that he has 4 game-winning drives this year? And the Falcons are 4-3. In every single win, he's had a game-winning drive. He's had multiple comebacks. Now he won on the road against a division rival in Tampa Bay. I can't quit Desmond Ridder. I don't know what it is about me. Maybe it's not healthy. Maybe I'm in the wrong here. It's the old Al Pacino thing. Just when I think I'm out, he pulls me back in. And he pulled me back in this week. Steelers-Rams, continuing the... this is going to be a Mike Tomlin praise segment. Rams, I thought, missed a ton of opportunities. I thought they got shafted late with that call on the quarterback sneak. I thought Cooper Kupp had a rare off game for him. But Mike Tomlin, with a horrible quarterback. Now, granted, Kenny Pickett in the fourth quarter last game against the Rams played the best quarter of his career. George Pickens was phenomenal, and they showed some ability to make plays when they needed to. I don't know how this team, if you just told me, like, just don't look at the scores, look at the film, and you said, what is this team's record? I'm like, 1-5. This team's awful. They can't run the ball. Kenny Pickett's a terrible quarterback. The offensive line is not very good. They have one good receiver, George Pickens. Deontay Johnson's okay. Defense makes some plays, but I still don't think the secondary is anything to write home about outside of Minka Fitzpatrick. And yet, 4-2. and they've beaten some good teams. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, and that's because Mike Tomlin still might be one of the most underrated coaches in NFL history. I mean, all this guy does with rosters that have clear holes, and the last 5 years he's had either injured quarterbacks or old washed Big Ben or young Kenny Pickett, who I don't think highly of, and they keep winning games. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense. And yet here he is. Here's Mike Tomlin again at 4-2 now. The Steelers are. They play Jacksonville next week, who's 5-2. Jaguars have won 4 in a row. I still think the Jaguars probably win the game. If they beat Jacksonville, because it is in Pittsburgh, they're 5-2 with multiple wins over, because they beat Baltimore too. They beat Cincinnati. This Steelers team is probably going to be in the playoffs, as crazy as it sounds. I salute you, Mike Tomlin. I salute you. I truly, truly don't know how you do it. Seahawks Cardinals, the last rapid fire take, which is Seahawks will be better than I thought they were this year. And this game showed me it, even though they turned it over 3 times against a bad Cardinals team. Because the Seahawks played awful, and they still beat a division rival by 10 in one of their worst games of the year. Geno Smith had a really boneheaded interception. They had some fumbles. I thought Arizona ran the ball well, which has kind of been what they've been doing on offense. They're good running the ball. And what could be their last game before Kyler Murray comes back and kind of supercharges that offense. Seattle did not play well, and they still managed to eke out a win in an NFC that, outside of the top 2 dogs, I think Detroit's loss kind of opened the floodgates again, and nobody really knows who the confirmed 3rd best team is. Seattle has all the pieces you need to make a run. Now, they're stuck behind San Francisco in the division. They're not as good as San Francisco. Eventually, they're going to have to run into them, and they're probably not going to win the division, so it's a bunch of road playoff games, unfortunately, for the Seahawks. That all stinks. But this infrastructure is so good in Seattle when I feel like everybody kind of went into the year thinking, all right, that was a nice run they had. Geno Smith in the playoffs. It's going to come to an end soon. And you know what? It didn't. Geno Smith keeps showing up to haters. I love watching the Seahawks. I like watching them win. Good win, even in some adverse circumstances. So with that, it is Monday Night Football time. The San Francisco 49ers on the road against the Minnesota Vikings in a game that it may be a 6-1 team or 5-1 team, against the 2-4 team, and it sounds like a blowout. I think it'll be closer than that. Still think the 49ers win. Let's call it maybe third. I'm going to say maybe 27-24. But I think this will be a close one for 2 reasons. I'm not off the Brock Purdy train just yet, but that game against the Browns, I think, showed you what Brock Purdy can be at his worst when he doesn't have an elite supporting cast. Now, he does have Christian McCaffrey, who's Christian McCaffrey and the best running back in the league, and a weapon that is so unique and so dominant that San Francisco can just keep leaning on him week in and week out. But now there's no Trent Williams. There's no Deebo Samuel. He won't have weather conditions like he had in Cleveland because they're playing indoors in Minnesota. But when Brock Purdy has everything working for him, he is so good at making decisions within Kyle Shanahan's system and executing it. Better than Jimmy Garoppolo was, I think. Because I think he's got more escapability, and I think he's a little bit more daring with his arm than Jimmy Garoppolo was, or is with the Raiders and was with the 49ers. But now he doesn't have his best offensive lineman, and he doesn't have his premier yak guy, which I don't care who's your quarterback in a Kyle Shanahan offense, this is a yak system. This is get our guy the ball in space and let's see him cook. And they got one of the best guys for in Deebo Samuel. He doesn't have him this week against the Vikings. That's going to be a huge loss. I know they got Jawan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk, but you just can't throw them in and expect Deebo Samuel production. And he's going against a Viking defense that I still don't think is particularly great, but they're certainly better than they were last year. I don't think Brian Flores is an amazing defensive coordinator. He's very Wink Martindale of the Giants in that he has one system and he sticks to it. Doesn't matter what you say. Doesn't matter what happens. He is blitzing. He is coming. And when it overwhelms you, Vikings look like an amazing team. Now, of course, when Justin Herbert gets the ball out quick, he goes 40-47, and the Vikings end up getting killed by the Chargers. But I'm really excited to watch Shanahan against this defense because he knows, he being Brian Flores, knows the 49ers are a wounded team right now. They don't have their best players. Offensive line's banged up. Brock Purdy, I think, is pretty good against the blitz. But again, with how good the line is, he doesn't really have a ton of guys in his face all the time. He's definitely mobile and escapable, but he's not Lamar Jackson. Stylistically, I feel like this could be a pretty tough matchup for San Francisco. As tough as it could be against a 2-4 team. Looking at Minnesota, I think we expected some regression to the mean this season because they were 13-4, I believe, last year, and they were like 9-1 in one-score games. I mean, every one-score game went their way. That wasn't going to happen this year. And then they had almost like a Giants-esque regression to the mean where they've been bad, but I'm like, all right, they're not that bad. Because I'm looking at this team, even with no Justin Jefferson, which has been known for a while, it's completely changes the offense. With no Justin Jefferson, this offense is totally different. But even with that, you still get Kirk Cousins, still get an offensive coach from Kevin O'Connell, who's kind of a Shanahan guy, McVay guy, but Shanahan and McVay are kind of symbiotic. They steal from each other. They have very similar styles. You get Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell. That gives you a baseline floor of competency on the offensive end that I think could be pretty fun to watch if everything goes well. Like Jalen Butler in chat right here says this game's going to be a blowout. They don't have JJ being Justin Jefferson. I mean, yeah, Justin Jefferson, I'm not doubting he's the best wide receiver in the league. I'm certainly not doubting that the offense is worse by not having him. But on a team with TJ Hawkinson and on a team with an offensive line that for the first time in years doesn't look unwatchably bad with a non-mobile Kirk Cousins, I mean, I don't think you can count it out. Now, here's where I think Jalen is coming from in terms of he thinks that not only do you not have Justin Jefferson, you don't have Justin Jefferson against what may be the best defense in football in that Niners defense. You got Nick Bosa on the defensive line, who's still Nick Bosa, still one of the best pass rushers in the league. In my opinion, unquestioned, best linebacker in the league in Fred Warner. Fred Warner is doing things that we haven't seen from a middle linebacker in years. There's some good linebackers in this league. Roquan Smith, his buddy Dre Greenlaw. But Fred Warner, a guy that big, people forget this about Fred Warner. When he was at BYU, he was basically this size, like 6'5", 238. They were using him in some weird packages. They almost had him lined up as like a nickel corner. At 6'5", 238, this guy just flies to the ball. So smart, so athletic, so fast. Hard to really get much of anything going, especially on the ground is the biggest problem. That's where the Vikings, I think, have their big flaws. Alexander Mattison, I don't think has played particularly well. They've traded for Cam Akers. They really haven't used him. Ty Chandler got a bunch of preseason hype, and Ty Chandler hasn't really done anything. If they want to establish the run, good freaking luck. Good luck against Fred Warner. Now, the secondary for the Niners, I think, is the weakest part. But even again, Talanoa Hufanga, big, heavy hitter. They got players there. They certainly have players there. The question is, can somebody step up without Justin Jefferson? And if you look at the Vikings roster, they, at least to their credit, have invested to try to make it so that they're not totally dependent on Jefferson. They trade for TJ Hawkinson. They give him a huge contract. They draft Jordan Addison in the first round, who I thought's been very good this year for a rookie, who came in with kind of a limited skill set. I'd really love Jordan Addison because of how skinny he was, and he didn't have like 4.3 blazing speed coming out of USC and Pitt. But I thought he's played pretty well. And then KJ Osborne, I don't think is amazing, but I think he's a good, solid number 3 receiver who's going to have to play like a good, solid number 2 receiver for the next couple weeks. It's certainly winnable. It's certainly a winnable matchup, I think, for the Vikings. It all depends on just keeping Kirk Cousins uptight and going stride for stride with Brock Purdy. With Cousins, too, this is, I think, going to be maybe the make or break game for the Vikings and what they choose to do. Because I know everybody's saying the Vikings have to go rebuild and get a young quarterback, especially some of the fans who want to see maybe a Caleb Williams, Drake May, or even if they want to get one of the mid-tier guys, Michael Penix, Shadur Sanders if he comes out. Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Quinn Ewers. Like, this is a loaded quarterback class. We might have 8-9 guys go in the first 3 rounds. And a Vikings team that very clearly has a ceiling with Kirk Cousins, and they're not going to win a Super Bowl. I could see why fans are just saying, all right, good player. We've tried this. It doesn't work. Good player, but we need to find somebody else. I could see fans operating like that. And even Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, I could see operating like that. I didn't pick Kirk Cousins coming here. Not my guy. Let me get my guy, my young quarterback. I'm going to build my team around with my offensive coach and my superstar receiver in Justin Jefferson. I like that idea. But quarterback play, always so fickle, man. How many great quarterbacks are there in the league right now? 3 or 4, 5? How many well above average quarterbacks are there? 6, 7? And Kirk Cousins is probably one of them. He's probably one of the above average quarterbacks. Grass is not always green on the other side, man. I know that Kirk hasn't done as much postseason winning as maybe I would have expected, as Viking fans expected, as general NFL observers expected. But if you just look at the numbers, Kirk Cousins with the Vikings in 6 years, 167 touchdowns, 54 picks, and a passer rating of 101. 101! That'd be one of the highest ratings in NFL history. And now you're willing to just throw all that out? To go and get another young kid, a 22-year-old kid who was nervous about asking somebody to senior prom 4 years ago? With a team that I still think, I don't know if they're not a win now team, but you think Justin Jefferson is going to want to sign a big contract and then play with a rookie quarterback? You think a lot of these defensive guys are going to want to spend the last years of their career with a rookie quarterback? You may have to go full teardown if that happens. And as somebody who opposes full teardowns in principle, because I just don't like rooting for nebulous organizational change. I don't like rooting for just fire everybody. It's a dumb motto to go by, a dumb philosophy. If you look at the Vikings, I still think if they win this game some way, somehow, and they go on a little run, Kwesi can look back at himself and go, you know what? Even though Kirk Cousins is old, I think he'll be 36 next year, Kirk Cousins. Even though he's old, I know I got a coach in Kevin O'Connell. Even if he may not have a great year this year, I like O'Connell as a coach. I got a coach. I got the best receiver in the game. I got one of the best edge rushers in the game in Danielle Hunter, who's leading the NFL in sacks right now. I got a coordinator that we finally believe in Brian Flores. I'm in a weak division. Bears are a tire fire. Packers are tire fire adjacent, in my opinion, with just how messy Jordan Love has got, the situation over there. And the Lions are good, but I mean, have the Lions really sustained success that much in their franchise history? Why don't I just run this back a ton and we'll just fight it out with the Lions for control of the NFC North for the next couple of years. And then if we get in the playoffs, we get in the playoffs. Maybe we get in a run. I could easily see that happening, personally. I still think the Niners will win 27-24, like I said earlier. And I still think this will be a predecessor to a Super Bowl run, or at least an attempted Super Bowl run. Because it's really tough to evaluate the Niners or even criticize the Niners, because I think they have pretty much said, we're really only evaluating ourselves against Philadelphia. Like, we know we're going to get into the playoffs. We know we're probably going to get to the NFC Championship game. It's just, can we beat the Eagles? Last year, we really don't know if they could have, because Brock Purdy got hurt so early in the game. And before that game against the Browns, that was the only game he had lost as a starter, and he really didn't even play in it. So it's really tough to, like, even if they lose today, you're really going to freak out. Like, it's tough to really project the Niners long term. I just feel like they're so solid. Everybody knows they're going to win games. Everybody knows they're going to fight for the Super Bowl this year. If they lose, it's going to be 2 in a row, but don't do alarm bell stuff. They're going to be fine. They're going to be good. It's probably going to be them and Philly in the championship game. That's just my personal opinion. Jalen Butler says 31-17 Niners. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens either. Let me know what you think. Comment in the chat. Comment afterwards. I want to hear your guys' predictions. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the Stack in the Box Week 7 recap. We're live every single Monday right before the Monday Night Football game. Make sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and Spotify and Overcast. Wherever it may be you get your podcasts, we are on all those sites. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to watch the Stacking the Box show on Tuesdays and our college football show, which has really had some really nice reception. Thank you so much for tuning into that. As always, you can find me on the Jet Press with my co-host Justin Freed, where we do all New York Jets stuff every Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I have been Mike Luciano, and we will see you guys next week.